Continue.
Okay. Okay, take 2.5. I'm Grace Blakely, reporting for On the Map, Off the Radar, and this week I'm with my friend and classmate Sa'eed Husaini, and we're going to be talking about the elections in Nigeria. So Sa'eed, the elections have recently been postponed, and I guess we're just kind of wondering why that happened and what implications that might have.
Sure. So some quick facts. The elections were initially scheduled for February 14th, and then they were postponed a week before actually they were supposed to be held. And the reason given by the electoral commissioner who announced the postponement was that the security forces had informed him that they weren't going to be able to provide protection for the commission during the elections. And what's kind of shocking about that is the dates were set a year ago.
Yeah.
And the security situation hasn't dramatically changed of recent. So, it raised a lot of skepticism, predictably from the opposition party, but then also from civil society groups in the country and from the international community.
And how do you think that kind of extra period of time is going to affect the result? Will it lead to more support for Buhari? Or?
Well, I mean, the calculation from the side of the ruling party, based on what a lot of analysts are saying, is that Buhari was gaining a lot of momentum before the postponement. So this looks like a move to buy time for the ruling party.
Okay.
But actually, the postponement has raised, like I said, a lot of skepticism, and people are sort of wondering, like, hey, is the president trying to make sort of an old school authoritarian move here? So that actually has the potential to affect his ratings come election day.
But speaking of authoritarianism, I mean, Buhari obviously has been in power before. Are you kind of concerned about his authoritarian tendencies? Or?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a different context now. Some people would describe Nigeria currently as a semi-authoritarian state. It's like a semi-democracy, or some people call it competitive authoritarian state.
Okay.
Because the incumbent has he has power to kind of control the outcome in some ways, but elections still matter.
Yeah.
In theory, he could lose. So I think Buhari winning now actually has the potential to move Nigeria further towards a more democratic kind of state, because it would be a situation where an incumbent lost, which we haven't seen in the past 14 years.
And do you think either obviously Buhari's gained a lot of power because of the unwillingness or inability of Goodluck Jonathan to tackle Boko Haram.
Right.
Do you think that he would be able to kind of combat all Nigeria's insecurity problems?
Well, he definitely has some selling points. He comes from the north, where the insurgency is raging. He has a lot of support in the north, so it would seem like he could pull together the various constituencies in the north that you would need to actually tackle this more aggressively. And then he has that military background, so it seems like he could raise morale. That's kind of one of the key issues that's making it difficult to tackle the crisis right now.
Yeah, and what about the kind of insecurity in the south and the centre? Is that
Buhari has mentioned, as both candidates have, because this is a huge issue, and it does receive a lot of international support, international attention as well. Because in the south, in the Niger Delta, what I assume you're referring to, the oil is a huge concern for actors globally. So both candidates necessarily have had to have laid down some sort of vision for how they would approach that. But really, there's hardly a difference in terms of what the specifics of how they've actually proposed to address this issue.
Okay, and to get a kind of Nigerian perspective on this, how are people feeling on the ground, like in terms of your friends and family?
People, there's some apprehension, because of the prevailing security situation. But then also there's some excitement because, these are historic elections. It's the first time that there's been a viable opposition movement that has the potential to actually unseat the ruling party in the past 14 years since Nigeria returned to democracy. So I think people recognize that their votes actually could change something very real and very sort of substantial in the near future.
That's exciting. And finally, how do you feel like the elections in Nigeria in general is portrayed in the Western media?
There's a tendency to focus on Boko Haram. It certainly is, a very real and very sensational issue. So within Nigeria, outside, the media does tend to gravitate towards that. But then, there's a lot else happening. The opposition movement that's kind of burgeoning is kind of forming, has had a very successful primary, and I think it would have been interesting if the media had covered that, because that's something that Nigerians have viewed with the level of optimism.
Yeah.
So
there's a tendency, isn't there, for stories coming out of Africa to end up doom and gloom and stuff.
yeah,
I guess,
certainly.
As a Nigerian, there's a lot of reason for kind of optimism.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Well, that's all we have for today. But thank you very much for talking to me. That was really interesting, and we hope that was helpful in your understanding of the Nigerian election. So thanks, Sa'eed.